This is Chris, the Idaho Painter here on Paint Live TV. This subject is about painting on your tape, and you really should not paint on your tape, but you do have to paint on your tape eventually. Or not, if you're not using tape, I guess it doesn't even apply. But here we are, we got a scenario right here. And at what point in time do you paint on your tape, and to what point in time do you pull your tape? So I've got this accent wall we're working on. I worked around this accent wall and I stayed away from my tape on my first coat. About 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch. Because if you paint on your tape on your first coat and your paint's going to eventually dry from your wall to your tape, when you take and pull your tape off, it's going to bridge from your tape to your wall, and it's going to begin pulling it off your wall in what we call like shark's teeth. And that applies to any type of paint that has any type of sheen to it. Now, painting on your tape with flat paints, one of the great things about flat paint is it doesn't have very much acrylic in it. That's why it's flat. So you don't get bridging, or you're less likely, it's rare to get bridging. But paints from eggshell, satin, the higher the sheen, the more acrylic in the paint, the more stretch is going to be in the paint. So when you begin pulling your masking, it's going to begin pulling off the paint from your tape to your surface. Even if your surface is primed, even if you've done everything right, it's typically going to pull. Now with flat paints, once again, you can get away with this method because a lot of the times the flat paint, there's no stretch in it and it's going to crack right along that edge as you begin pulling it off. This is a flat paint right here, so I don't necessarily have to worry about it. But in order to just resolve that whole situation, we just stay away from our tape on our first coat. On our second coat, we're going to go back and we're going to brush hit our tape. I'm not going to put a lot of pressure. I'm not going to hit it very hard because I don't want to force any paint underneath my frog tape. The frog tape does an amazing job swelling up and not allowing anything underneath it. But I'm going to touch my tape, get the paint on there, and then I'm going to roll my wall. So I'm going to roll the wall next right over the top of my cut-in, just like this. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to roll that. And while that is all still wet, I'm not going to allow any of this wall to dry or any portion of this wall to dry before I start pulling off my tape. This is a flat paint, extremely forgiving. You can almost get away with leaving this on for the entire day, pulling your tape and not having any type of bridging. But what I'm going to do is I'm not going to risk that. We'll just say like this is a satin paint. I'm not going to pull all my tape. Obviously I can't because I'm not finished, but I'm just going to begin pulling the tape where I've completed before it dries. Now, a lot of this is going to be temperature related, humidity related. How fast is the paint drying? Just like that. I'm going to get down to this point. I'm pretty saturated right there. I'm just going to tack that up right there, and I'm going to begin continue working right down the line here. So what you don't want to do, once again, if you're using any type of paint with a sheen on it, do not paint on your tape and allow it to dry at any point in time. But once again, there's always different situations, different scenarios, things happen. And then you have to allow the paint to dry. Then what I'm going to do if that happens, if this dries, I'm going to just take a super sharp knife and I'm going to score this if it dries. And by scoring it, that will stop that from what we call bridging or shark's teething. So I've got all my cut-ins done. Around here, working around my tape, show you what this looks like. We'll get it all pulled off and you can see what it looks like. If I need to get a second coat on my ceiling cut-ins up top, I've got a video on how to two-coat your cut-ins simply and easily. I mean, some of this looks a little bit different than I typically do it because I've been shooting a video how to do your cut-ins, how to do this accent wall. So you want to see the exact method of how I do an accent wall, you can watch my accent wall video specifically. So this wall is almost rolled 2 coats. I'll begin pulling the masking. Do you have a video on how I go about rolling a wall and laying out a wall too, if you want to check that video out. Just got some methods that I talk about that has worked for me for the last 25 years. But now I ended right here where it was starting to dry. So I'm just gonna throw that up on my plastic. Now I'm just gonna begin pulling my tape off where it's still wet, getting nice, crisp, clean lines. Accent wall end right there. This frog tape alone right there with no caulking on it right there gave pretty crisp, clean line. Right here, it's got an issue. We got some pulling off the paint on the trim there. We'll have to touch that up. We're just gonna begin pulling all this off. I can tack it right on my plastic here. The blinds, we would typically remove the blinds before painting, but in order to give you a good view of this video, we left the blinds on. Otherwise, the video would be too blown out, too bright, in other words. So this edge is still wet right here. Just gonna pull that off. Frog tape, no caulking right there. Perfectly crisp line. I'm gonna pull plastic off my blind and roll my tape up inside there. Now I don't have any wet paint on tape that's gonna get anywhere. And there is our wall. We got a few trim touch-ups we're gonna do. And that's my method of don't paint on your tape. There you have it, some tips and tricks. Painting over your tape, when to pull your tape, whether you should paint over your tape or not, and how to not get any type of bridging. If you've got any methods, if you've got any comments when it comes to this, if you got some tips and tricks that are better than what I do or something different, just leave it down in the comment section below. Just ask your questions down there. We learn from you just like you learn from us right here on Paint Life TV. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. Please hit the notification bell, because if you don't hit them both, it doesn't do anything. Subscribing to our channel is just a very simple way to help support us. It doesn't cost you anything other than your time of 2 clicks. We'll see you right here next time on Paint Life TV on another really cool project with some new tips and tricks.